everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling a question.
Ooh, a big one.
Yeah, a really big one. Why do we believe?
Okay.
And more specifically, why is religious belief so persistent across cultures, across history?
Yeah.
Even as science, it's kind of explaining more and more about the world around us.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating question
It is.
because it really gets at the core of what makes us human.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we're going to be going deep on this topic with this awesome panel discussion from the World Science Festival.
Oh, cool.
It's called The Believing Brain: Evolution, Neuroscience, and the Spiritual Instinct. And they have an incredible lineup. They've got an anthropologist,
Wow.
neuroscientist, a psychologist, all kind of weighing in.
So we're getting all these different perspectives then.
Yeah, exactly. And get this.
Right.
Even in our modern scientific age, the vast majority of people around the world still identify with some form of religion.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. There are over 4,000 distinct religions practiced on Earth.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know. It's just mind-blowing. So clearly, this impulse to believe in something beyond the tangible world
Right.
is powerful.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe we should start with this basic question then.
Yeah.
Is this tendency toward belief,
Yeah.
hardwired into our brains? Is it something that we're born with? Or is it something that we learn?
Right. Is it nature or nurture?
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the panelists, Stephen Pinker, who's an evolutionary psychologist, argues that there's no real evidence that religious belief itself is a direct product of evolution.
Okay.
He thinks that instead it could be a byproduct of our ability to understand other people's minds.
Oh, interesting. What's that called again?
Theory of mind.
Theory of mind, right.
Yeah. So, we obviously can't see into other people's thoughts, but we're pretty good at figuring out what they're thinking and feeling.
Right, based on how they're acting, facial expressions.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And Pinker thinks that this same skill that helps us, decode other humans might be what leads us to see intention and agency in the natural world in things that don't actually have it.
Okay, so our ancestors might have thought a storm was angry or...
Right, or that the sun was like a god watching over them.
Oh, okay, I see.
And it might not have been that they actually believed these things, but they might have gotten some kind of advantage.
Right.
By seeing those patterns in the world.
Yeah,
I know.
Totally. It's kind of an optical illusion where your brain is making up a pattern even if it's not really there.
Yeah. And this actually connects with what Lisa Barrett was saying. She's a neuroscientist.
Okay.
And she brought up this idea that uncertainty is super stressful for our brains.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're wired to look for explanations. And if we don't know why something is happening,
oh, it's scary.
It can be really scary. It can cause a ton of anxiety. And so religions, with their stories and explanations, they can help us deal with that, right?
Yeah.
They offer answers when we don't know what's going on. It can be very calming.
That makes sense. It's better the devil you know.
Yeah, exactly. And our brains actually show this. The amygdala, the part of our brain that deals with fear, when we're stressed, it goes into overdrive.
Right.
Pumping out all these hormones, putting our body on high alert.
Yeah.
But when we feel certain, we understand something, that stress response chills out.
So, is religious belief almost hitting the pause button on that stress response?
Maybe. That's a really interesting way to think about it. And Barrett even took it a step further and compared it to, the way we value money.
Oh, it's okay.
A dollar bill, it's just paper, right?
Right.
But we all agree that it has value. So she's wondering if religious belief might be kind of similar.
Yeah.
It gives us a way to deal with the uncertainties of life.
Yeah, I like that. It makes me think that even if we don't take all those beliefs literally, maybe all those rituals and things help us regulate our emotions, help us feel grounded.
Yeah.
I don't know, have you ever felt calmer after praying, even if you weren't sure if anyone was listening?
That's a really interesting question.
Maybe that's tapping into the same thing.
Yeah, maybe. It's a good question for everyone listening to think about.
Yeah. So if belief isn't necessarily something that we evolved to do directly, when do we start seeing signs of it?
Well, Barbara King,
yeah,
the anthropologist, she takes us way back to explore the roots of spirituality.
Okay.
Some of this stuff is crazy.
Really?
Yeah, she talks about these burial rituals found in the Rising Star Cave in South Africa. They're 250,000 years old.
What?
It's insane.
Yeah.
And these early humans, Homo naledi, they seem to have treated their dead with such care.
Wow.
It really suggests something more than just practical disposal.
250,000 years ago. That's incredible.
I know. And it wasn't just Homo naledi. She also talks about Neanderthal burials,
Right.
where they put symbolic objects in the graves.
Oh, wow.
And then there's Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, this possible ritual site that's older than Stonehenge.
Oh, okay.
So it seems like this sense of the sacred, this concern for something beyond just the physical world, might be much older than we thought.
So even if we can't, hop in a time machine and ask them what they believed,
Right.
their actions really give us some insight into their minds.
Yeah, it's like a window into how they thought.
They were doing things that show they had abstract thought.
Yeah.
Symbolism. It's pretty amazing.
It is. And what's interesting is that King really emphasizes the role of community in all of this.
Okay.
And shared rituals. Like maybe it's not just about believing in a higher power,
Right.
but it's about that social bonding,
Okay.
that feeling of togetherness that you get from rituals.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It makes me think about how we all come together to create shared experiences like concerts or sporting events.
Even just like watching a sunset with friends,
Yeah.
there's something powerful about those moments.
There really is. And Barrett brought up this really interesting point about how, as social creatures, we actually regulate each other's nervous systems.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, think about how you feel when you're with close friends. You feel calmer, more at ease. So maybe shared rituals and beliefs can amplify those feelings even more.
Right.
And make those bonds even stronger, give us that sense of belonging.
It's like we're wired to connect, to find comfort and meaning.
Yeah.
And religion is one way. We've been doing that for a long time.
It is. But as science keeps advancing, revealing more about the universe,
Right.
I wonder if that need for religious belief will fade away.
Right? What does the future hold for religion?
That's a big question,
It is.
and one we'll have to get into in the next part of our deep dive.
Right on. Let's do it. So we've talked about how humans have this tendency to believe,
Yeah.
and we've looked at some possible evolutionary roots of that. But now, let's look ahead.
Okay.
What happens to belief in a world that's, increasingly shaped by science and technology? Like, will religion just become obsolete?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Because as science, fills in more and more gaps in our understanding,
Right.
you'd think that the need for, religious explanations would go down.
Right.
But then you look around and religion's still a huge force in so many people's lives.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the panelists we're talking about, they have some really interesting perspectives on this. Barbara King, the anthropologist,
Yeah.
she acknowledges that there's this trend toward secularization,
Right.
where people are moving away from traditional religious beliefs. But she points out that for a lot of people, religion is much more than just a set of beliefs,
Yeah.
It's like a way of life,
Right.
a whole framework that shapes their values and their daily routines.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like in some cultures, religion is so tied up with family traditions,
Right.
social customs, even political systems, that it's hard to separate it out.
Totally. And she thinks that in those contexts, religion is probably going to stick around for a while.
Okay.
But Lisa Barrett,
Yeah.
she's the neuroscientist, she kind of wonders if we're hitting this point where the downsides of religion might start to outweigh the benefits.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. What does she mean by downsides?
Well, she doesn't get too specific here,
Okay.
but she mentions how religion can be a source of conflict
Right.
and division, like we've seen it throughout history,
Yeah, unfortunately.
where religious differences have led to wars and persecution.
Yeah, you can't deny that.
And so she seems to be suggesting that as we learn more about human psychology
Okay.
and how the world works, we might find other ways to get meaning and purpose that don't come with all that baggage.
It's like maybe we're kind of evolving beyond the need for those really specific belief systems.
Maybe. It's an interesting thought. And then we have Steven Pinker.
Okay.
And he's noticed this trend toward, more humanistic interpretations of religion.
Okay, what does he mean by humanistic?
He's talking about a move away from taking religious doctrines literally
Okay.
and more of a focus on the ethics of religion and the community aspects of it.
So it's more about the human connection and the shared values.
Right, exactly. And Pinker thinks this might be driven in part by the influence of science,
Okay.
As science explains more and more about the world, some people are looking for a more metaphorical or symbolic way to understand their religious traditions.
So it's like they're trying to make their faith fit with what they know about the world.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And Pinker also makes this interesting point about how the power of religion is sometimes overstated
Okay.
because religious groups tend to be more organized politically.
So it might look like they have more influence than they really do.
Exactly. Like he uses the example of voting in the United States, where evangelical Christians, they consistently have higher voter turnout
Right.
than other groups.
Okay.
So it might seem like their views represent the majority,
Right.
even if they don't.
That's a good point. It reminds us to look deeper at the things that shape, like, public discourse.
Exactly. It's not always what it seems on the surface. And this is relevant to so many issues, not just religion.
Right, right.
But speaking of shifting perspectives,
Yeah.
let's get into this wild thought experiment that the panel brings up.
Okay.
What if we met an alien civilization?
Whoa!
Like a really advanced one. Would they get our religious beliefs?
That's such a cool thought. Like, just imagining aliens is mind-blowing enough.
I know.
But trying to imagine what they'd think about our religions, that's crazy.
Right. It forces us to step outside of our own human-centered way of seeing things.
Totally.
And think about all the possibilities out there.
Okay, so let's say we do make contact.
Okay.
What do the panelists think would happen?
Well, they have a bunch of different ideas, which is what's fun about it. Barbara King, since she's an anthropologist who studies all these different cultures, she thinks the aliens would probably be baffled by our religions.
That makes sense. So much of human religion is tied to, like, our specific history, our cultures, our understanding of the world.
Right, exactly. It's hard to imagine how beings from another planet with a totally different evolutionary history would understand any of it.
Like, how would you even begin to explain the Holy Trinity to an alien?
Right. Or reincarnation.
Yeah.
It'd be impossible. They probably have totally different ways of understanding, you know, existence, consciousness.
It's like trying to explain the rules of baseball to someone who's never even seen a ball before.
Exactly. But then Zoran Josipovic, the neuroscientist who studies consciousness, he has a different take.
Yeah.
He thinks that if these aliens are super advanced, if they understand consciousness better than we do, they might see our yearning for something spiritual as just a natural stage in the evolution of intelligent life.
Whoa, so they'd be looking at us and thinking like, oh, those humans, they're just figuring things out.
Yeah, like they're still working through those big questions.
Yeah.
And maybe they'd even see religion, even with all its problems, as like a stepping stone to something greater.
It's kind of like a developmental phase, right?
Yeah.
Like when kids believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy, it seems silly to us as adults.
Right.
But it's part of how they grow up.
Exactly. And Josipovic thinks these aliens might see that same pattern across the universe.
This is blowing my mind. So we've got one expert who thinks aliens would be totally lost and another who thinks they'd see it as like totally normal.
Right.
What about the others?
Well, that's where we'll pick up in the last part of our deep dive.
Okay, I can't wait. Let's go. Okay, so we're back and we're still kind of trying to wrap our heads around this idea of like, what would an advanced alien civilization think about human religion?
Right.
We've heard from Barbara King, who thinks they'd be totally confused, and Zoran Josipovic, who thinks they might see it as a natural stage in the evolution of intelligence.
Or like a developmental phase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the other panelists? What do they think?
Well, Lisa Barrett, the neuroscientist who studies emotions, she imagines that these aliens, their advanced understanding of consciousness, would view religion as like a necessary but temporary phase in our development. She uses this really interesting analogy of training wheels.
Training wheels.
Yeah.
I like that.
Like, think about when you're learning to ride a bike. Training wheels give you that stability.
Right.
You need to get started. But eventually, as you get better at riding, you don't need them anymore. So Barrett thinks that religion might be similar. You know, it gives us comfort, meaning, social connection.
Right.
Especially when things are uncertain.
Yeah.
But as we evolve and understand more about ourselves and the universe, we might find other ways to get those things.
Right.
Ways that don't involve supernatural beliefs.
Okay, so it's kind of like how we've developed other ways to deal with stress and uncertainty, like therapy.
Right, or mindfulness.
Support groups, all that.
Okay.
Like, those are our big kid bikes for dealing with emotions.
I like that. And then there's Steven Pinker.
Okay.
And he thinks these aliens might understand our religious beliefs.
Okay.
Even recognize that they were important historically, but ultimately see them as something we've moved past.
So it's kind of like how we look back at ancient cultures who believed in gods living on mountaintops.
Yeah, or spirits in the trees.
Right, right. We get why they believe those things, but we don't think those beliefs are accurate or necessary anymore.
Exactly. Pinker's point is that knowledge is always changing. What seems important at one point in time can become outdated.
Right.
And he seems to think that religion might be like that.
Okay.
Something that was helpful in the past but isn't crucial for our future.
It's really making me think about belief in general.
Yeah.
Like, we have this need to make sense of the world, to find meaning, to connect to something bigger than ourselves.
Right.
And religion has been a huge part of that.
For sure.
But as we change, maybe the ways we do those things will change too.
That's a really great point. It's something a lot of people are thinking about right now.
Yeah.
As our world is reshaped by science and technology, as we understand how vast the universe is,
right,
we have to figure out where we fit in.
Yeah.
And for some people, that means questioning their old belief systems.
It's almost like we're going through this collective growing up as a species.
I like that.
We're questioning the old stories, looking for new ways to understand ourselves and the universe.
Yeah, and who knows what the future holds.
Right.
Maybe we'll create new forms of spirituality.
Yeah.
Or find meaning in ways we haven't even thought of yet.
That's kind of exciting.
It is. There's
Yeah.
so many possibilities. And I think this deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
It has.
Different perspectives on why we believe and what the future of belief might be.
We took this huge, complex topic of belief,
Yeah.
broke it down, looked at it from all sides, put it back together.
And hopefully it's helped us understand it a little better.
Yeah, definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the believing brain,
Okay.
I have one last question for our listeners.
Right.
If those advanced aliens do show up,
Yeah.
will they have the same spiritual needs that we do? Or will they have moved beyond that?
That is a great question.
And what does their answer tell us about ourselves?
Right.
And our place in this massive, incredible universe?
It really makes you think.
Keep those questions in mind as you go forth from this deep dive. Until next time.